hope by now everybody understands that when you view from a universal scope the teachings of Jesus, you find he's giving you a process of seeking, finding, and putting into activity that which makes life wonderful and worthwhile. And all of those teachings start from the root concept that God is the source of everything. The source of ourselves, of all power, of all wisdom, of all everything, whatever it might be. And we sometimes have a little difficulty understanding that this source is all good. There is no evil mixed up in it. It's just plain, flat, all good. And this gift of good is one which is given to every single human being for their using. Now, it was pretty clear that Jesus desired that every person comes to the realization that every one of us is one with God. We're all one with that single source. And that knowing this, every person is able, if they will, to manifest form by the transforming of ideas. And this is just the same way that Jesus created the world as the allegory in Genesis provides us. You know, you think about that. Here's God created the universe. And by the time we know anything about it, there are humans on the plane of the earth. And some of them are really good, and some of them are really not so good. There are those that are breaking every kind of moral law that can be thought of, and there are some of them that are keeping every one of them. Now, strangely enough, in the process of that, in the olden days, they used to think that God would get just mad and no wet hen at those people who did these bad things and would suffer them with all kinds of things. But then Jesus came along and he said, wait a minute, let's be logical about this. Let's see what really is the process here. Does not the sun shine on everyone? Does not the rain fall upon the good and the bad? In other words, isn't God just able to provide everybody with everything that is good all of the time, regardless of what they're doing? And you think about that for just a minute, and all of a sudden you say, here's God saying, I love you right now, regardless of what terrible things other people think you're doing. I love you. And my purpose for you is to help you to find your own happiness again, to find your own prosperity, your own good again. That's what I want to do. And I don't care how many times you've made that mistake, I'm still with you, and I'm still giving you this same encouragement to continue on. In other words, in God, there is no condemnation. There is only encouragement to find, practice, and experience the good. Well, Jesus realized that there are people that forget their oneness with God. And somehow or other that gets all covered over by misinterpreted ideas and events and conditions. Now, these things, combined with some error ideas, bring about effects or manifestations that make life seem fearful, boring, poor, hopeless. You know, some of us have had that experience, and we don't want that experience anymore. Now, what if when we had done that, all of a sudden God said, you're a bad boy, and I'm going to just bring down the lightning strike on top of you and get you out of this world right now and put you down in hell? I mean, you deserve it, don't you? No. Well, God said, wait a minute. Whoa. I still want you to be pure. I still want you to have the happiness of the world. I want you to be able to enjoy the kingdom of heaven that I've put inside of you. Are you getting the message? Are you getting the message? There is no such thing as godly condemnation. And any time that you are involved or you see other people involved, you see that these manifestations that we call terrible are opposite from those that Jesus determined was intended for us by God. You do know, I hope, that Jesus taught and demonstrated beauty, good health, emotional wholeness, and everything that makes your human body function with ease, comfort, and efficiency. Every one of the so-called miracles are what that's all about, right? So why would you think that God somehow, on the other hand, would come around and start going, "Bam, I'm going to get you. I'm going to send you down somewhere, down where you're going to suffer and burn and all that stuff, all the rest of eternity." Well, it just didn't like that. Well, anyway, Jesus recognized that people in general weren't recognizing and enjoying life to the full, and he came to the recognition that they were just doing it to themselves. It wasn't what they were being done to, it's what they were doing to themselves. So very early it becomes evident that Jesus is teaching us that God neither punishes nor condemns. The only punishment or condemnation occurs when a person forgets or ignores the truth of who they truly are, a child of God. Then the punishment is inherent in the mistake, and there is condemnation after that, of course. That's another word for ongoing punishment, but it is self-inflicted. Not God-inflicted, self-inflicted. We ourselves are the ones that carry around the guilt package into the present because of some kind of mistake in the past. The will of God is always that we leave the past and enter into the gates of the kingdom of heaven, which are within us. So the question, of course, is why in the world do we make those kind of mistakes? And it's basically because we're either ignorant of the truth or because we forget to put the truth into action in our lives. But what in the world is this thing called truth? We're studying Emmett Fox's Sermon on the Mount in the mornings, on Sunday mornings, and you're welcome to come. And one of the things that he says in that book is, quote, "The truth turns out to be nothing less than the amazing but undeniable fact that the whole outer world is amenable to man's thought, and that he has dominion over it when he knows it. The outer world, far from being the prison of circumstances that it's commonly supposed to be, has actually no character of its own, either good or bad. It has only the character we give it by our own thinking. It is naturally plastic to our thoughts, and this is whether we know it or not, whether we wish it or not." There's another thing Jesus knew that everybody all ought to realize, and that is he knew that every person is an instrument of free will, and that you can use it either wisely or foolishly. For example, he saw in the religious institutions of his day the misconceptions of free will. Because you see, there were these religionists who had added punishments, who had manipulated the people, who had demanded certain actions, and they judged and acted upon their own judgments according to those made-up laws. Now, these actions seldom brought peace, harmony, abundance, and so forth. Mostly they had the effect of producing fear and resentment and a turning away from any real trust in God. Now, their ignorant belief was that they had the freedom to act in any way that they please on their judgment of what's outside of them. But Jesus said, well, nope, that's not it. Don't judge by those appearances out there. Rather judge with right or righteous judgment. So rather than the power of free will resting in being able to do anything we want, our free will and our greatest power lies in our choice of what we think. Now, Paul says the whole world is amenable to our thought. That means that the actions of the world flow into the form of our belief-held thought to accomplish its purpose as a completed, unified whole. And it's not just those puny actions that we can alone take by flailing at the outer world. So Jesus led us into the wisdom that action, taken purely because we think we're free to do so, may or may not bring good results. That which is held in thought, believing, is going to be demonstrated in our lives whether or not we're directly involved in the action or not. Now, remembering this is one of the greatest challenges that we have in our lives. Remembering this in every aspect of our life and everyday living is a concentrated effort. It doesn't just happen. We have to think about it. To demonstrate in nearly every area of our life leaves us with undesirable results in every area that we forget or that we ignore. And Jesus is saying to you, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. No. He told a couple of parables that illustrate the idea. A parable is a means by which he clothed the truth in the cloth of fiction. That is, with stories. And he did this so that we could allow them to go into our mind, easy to remember, and then to lead us or guide us into those choices that will lead us further into the truth. Now, those two parables are recorded in the book of Luke in the 15th chapter. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him. And the Pharisees and the scribes murmured, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. Now, the common thought of the day was that Jesus would condemn those sinners, and therefore you should never have anything to do with them because they were unwanted by God anymore. Hated by God, is it sometimes. So, here's what Jesus did. He told them this parable. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he's lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing, and when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. You beginning to get that story? He continues with it in another aspect of that same concept. He says, oh, what woman having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the coin which I had lost. Just so I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. To me, the story is just perfectly clear. I hope it is to you, but just in case. You also recall that there's a third parable that follows right here. It's called the parable of the prodigal son. But we're not going to do that today because that takes at least one more and maybe 1,700 other lessons. That's a great parable. We leave that for some other time. The interpretation of these two parables is usually given as how happy God is when we give up being a sinner and are saved. And that's pretty good, since it does point out the value each person is, no matter what their status in life is. But like all of Jesus' teaching, there are other levels of meaning here, but each of us has those levels. If we could just understand them, by understanding the universal symbology of the pictures created, we'd be better off. And they can be understanding when we're willing and apply focus on the images of the parable with a view for further understanding. For example, Urban Seal and Learn to Live whets our appetite for understanding with these images from the parable of the lost sheep. And I'll read you just a little of that. He says, all through the Bible, the sheep and the shepherd are symbols of the spiritual mind. The chief belief or dominant conviction in the mind is the shepherd, which shepherds all the thoughts and moods and attitudes and outlooks of the mind. Ideally, the consciousness of the law and the presence of God should be the dominant shepherd of the consciousness. This is why Jesus spoke of himself as the good shepherd. For the spiritual mind alone can shepherd and keep the parts of consciousness in health and in harmony. A false belief is a false shepherd which allows the sheep to be devoured by the wolves of fear, avarice, and anxiety. The spiritual shepherd is always on guard that he lose none of his sheep in the ugly emotions of the outside world. When his hope or his confidence wanders away, he's quick about it to bring it back to the fold. He will leave 99 stable emotions to work upon that one which is unstable until he gets it associated harmoniously with the whole plan and the purpose of life. Now remember these ideas. Etch the images into your memory. Catch the image of the truth that the spiritual mind, that is, that mind that was in Christ Jesus, alone can shepherd and keep the parts of consciousness in health and harmony. So as you think about it, image yourself as that one with the flock, and that you're guiding that flock and protecting it and gaining the good that you get from the keeping of it. Now I know that the world is going to give you many reasons for rejecting such a picture of yourself. Almost any problem that comes up appears to be too much for a single person to handle. It's almost as if there's a pack of wolves that beset our flock and we see no help at hand. We're overwhelmed by the puniness of our singleness of action, and we will, what can just one person do against all of this? None of you have ever done that. So we seek to band together with people like mine who want the same things we do, and we cooperate to make what we want to happen with the force of the concerted power. That's one of the reasons for the church. But we have vast evidence that we couldn't possibly do that all by ourselves. And sometimes we're not able to find people who will do it with us. And when we do, we just feel lost and alone. We feel that nobody cares for us, that we're worthless to anybody or anything. You know, maybe that's the way the sheep feels when it wanders away and loses contact with the herd. Both of these images of hopelessness and unworthiness are just plain false images. And neither one of them is ever the truth about you at any time. You have them not because they're valid, but because we've either forgotten or ignored the truth about ourselves. We've judged ourselves by appearance rather than by that thing called righteous judgment. Now, we've forgotten that the world is amenable to our thought. The world is not amenable to our actions. The world is amenable to our thoughts. And we have forgotten that it is the Father's good pleasure to give us this kingdom of heaven. And so we go around ignoring this unconditional gift, and we make up all kinds of conditions of what we have to get or to give. And so we lose our confidence in the divine idea of accepting without obligation and of giving without condition. We have ignored the process of growth that Jesus laid out for us. Remember that? Seek, find, and then place into activity. Seek, find, and act. Remember that simple little process? Because we've lost something that we place value upon, we cry out about the injustice and the iniquity of it all, rather than getting the broom out, lighting the light of desire, and sweeping the house of life until we re-find what it was that we lost. To enter and remain in the consciousness of our oneness with God, we've got to seek and find and put into activity all of our own attributes of good and of God. And we do have to do it on the outer as well as on the inner. But to be of maximum benefit, we must first seek guidance. Then, after we've gotten the guidance, seek the right course to follow, and then take the action indicated. But that action, friends, always begins in mind. First of all, you're going to create a mental prototype of what you desire. And then you're going to hold that image with absolute faith that is done for you and that it expresses one of the great positive aspects of God. And then you act outwardly. But you only act in concert with the changes that are taking place in the entire situation. And above all, as we do that, we never lose sight of the truth that it is not the activity or the effect of that activity that's important. It's simply whether or not we're expressing the will of God. Makes it pretty simple, doesn't it? You don't have to care what your action is. Maybe, does it express the joy of God? Does it express the peace of God, the creativeness of God, the compassion of God? Those are the questions we need to answer after we get our guidance and start taking our action. Whatever we do that expresses these will be accompanied by right action in everything that you do in your life. Now, of course, I'm talking about the ideal. It's okay to talk about the ideal. But what should our reaction be if we've gone along and we've really been trying, and all of a sudden we find that we've lost sight of the proper value system, the coin in this parable? Or we've been separated from the good thought, like that one sheep that wandered away. Should we then stop and wail and gnash our teeth and fearfully await the punishment that God or man is going to give us? Should we give up and quit? Should we sneer and say, oh, that wasn't all cracked up as it's supposed to be, that said it was going to be anyway? So just pick up these images of the parable. The shepherd and the woman both put aside their busy schedule. Both took the risk of deviating from the norm. And both set out in earnest to regain what they had lost. What was theirs, they had lost through negligence or ignorance. But it had been theirs, just as everything that God has given you as a gift for your life has always been yours. It had been theirs. But they recognized the loss and repented of it. Now, repentance was not prostrating themselves before a judge and pleading for mercy, the judge being God in this case, if you wanted it. Repentance was simply seeing the error and immediately and resolutely trying to correct it so that it becomes theirs again. And when you do, it comes back with joy, peace, grace, and increased creativity. And since the great power of God is expressed by us in thought, it is our consciousness that we need most to be seeking, finding, and putting into activity. And with that, to correct those errors of negligence and ignorance, and which will let us feel the joy of the angels of God, that one sinner has repented. That sinner being me. There is no condemnation in God. There is no punishment from God. There is only love, power, wisdom, and presence to make your life filled with joy. If you will but seek it, find it, and put it into action.